The man who walks alone is likely to find himself in places no one else has ever been. Albert Einstein. If you've ever felt like you're too different, too serious, or too independent for others, let I be the first to say, there's nothing wrong with you. In fact, the very things that make people uncomfortable about you are the same things that make you extraordinary. You're not a problem to be fixed. You're a blueprint for independence, resilience, and quiet mastery. Sigma males don't follow the beaten path, and that unsettles people. Society is designed for followers, those who seek validation, approval, and a sense of belonging at any cost. But you move differently. You don't seek permission to exist as you are. You don't conform just to make others comfortable. And because of that, you stand out, not as an outcast, but as an example of what true self-reliance looks like. This world will try to make you feel like an anomaly, like you need to soften your edges or explain yourself, but here's the truth. You don't owe anyone an explanation. Your value isn't measured by how well you fit into society's expectations. It's measured by your ability to build, adapt, and thrive on your own terms. So if you ever doubt yourself, remember this: you are not the problem. You are the antidote to a weak, distracted world. And one day they'll realize they should have followed your example instead of questioning your path. Number 1, you challenge the idea that a man must be tamed to be valuable. From the moment a boy starts to grow into a man, the world tries to shape him into something more manageable. He's told to be agreeable, to tone it down, to fit in. Strength is labeled as aggression, independence as selfishness, and confidence as arrogance. Society has spent decades convincing men that to be respected, they must first be tamed, stripped of their edge, softened, and made easier to control. But you refuse to be molded. You refuse to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. And that alone makes you stand out. You don't suppress your natural instincts to fit into society's weak expectations. You don't apologize for your ambition, your focus, or your unwillingness to tolerate nonsense. You operate on a different level, one that doesn't rely on approval or permission. That's what makes you valuable, not compliance. You know that power isn't something to be hidden, it's something to be mastered. People will try to shame you for this. They'll say you're too intense, too distant, too independent. But what they really mean is that you don't bend to their expectations, and that unsettles them. They expect men to be desperate for validation, easy to guilt, and willing to trade their strength for acceptance. But you've already broken free from that conditioning. You've proven that a man doesn't need to be tamed to be respected. He just needs to be undeniable. The world fears men who can't be controlled because they expose a harsh truth. Most people are too weak to stand on their own. Your existence challenges everything they believe about masculinity. You show them that a man can be powerful without permission, respected without submission, and valuable without compromise. And that's why you'll always be the blueprint. Number 2, you threaten the system because you don't need it. The world is built on a system of control, one that rewards obedience, punishes independence, and keeps people constantly seeking approval. Most men fall into this trap without even realizing it. They chase promotions they don't actually want, buy things they don't need to impress people they don't respect, and shape their identities around what society tells them they should be. But not you. You see the game for what it is, and you refuse to play by their rules. That alone makes you a threat. The system relies on men being predictable, hungry for validation, easy to guilt, and willing to trade their freedom for a false sense of security. It needs you to be dependent on titles, paychecks, and the approval of the crowd. But what happens when a man stops needing any of that? When he walks his own path, sets his own standards, and refuses to let fear dictate his choices? He becomes untouchable. You don't beg for opportunities, you create them. You don't conform to expectations, you redefine them. And because of that, people don't know what to do with you. They label you as difficult or cold because they can't manipulate you the way they do others. They'll try to shame you into compliance, make you feel like you're missing out, or frame your independence as selfishness. But deep down, they envy your freedom. A man who doesn't seek permission is a man who can't be controlled. And that terrifies a world built on dependency. The truth is, they don't want you to succeed on your own terms, because if you do, you expose the lie they've been living. You prove that a man can exist outside the system and thrive, and once others see that, the whole structure starts to crack. Number 3, you have no interest in pleasing the wrong people. Most people live in fear of rejection, They crave acceptance so badly that they tolerate disrespect, fake friendships, and one-sided relationships just to feel included. They spread themselves thin trying to please everyone, believing that being liked is the same as being valued. But you don't waste time on that. You know that loyalty is a privilege, not a handout. If someone hasn't earned a place in your life, they don't get one, and if that makes you seem arrogant, so be it. You don't chase people, you don't entertain fake connections, you don't keep people around just because it's convenient. If someone isn't bringing value, respect, or loyalty to the table, you walk away without hesitation. That level of decisiveness makes people uncomfortable. They're used to men who bend over backward to keep the peace, who tolerate nonsense just to avoid being labeled difficult. But you're different. You don't fear being misunderstood, and you don't beg for acceptance. This kind of mindset forces people to reveal who they really are. The ones who respect you will admire your discipline, while the ones who wanted to exploit you will call you cold. They'll say you're distant, unapproachable, or even arrogant. But what they're really saying is that they can't manipulate you. They can't guilt you into staying in a situation that drains you. They can't convince you to waste energy on people who wouldn't do the same for you. You understand that loyalty isn't about being available to everyone, it's about choosing wisely. You'd rather have a small circle of real ones than a crowd of leeches. You're not interested in playing social games or proving your worth to people who don't deserve you. And because of that, you move through life with a power most people will never understand. Number 4, you don't apologize for existing differently. Most men are taught from an early age to blend in, to soften their edges, and to make themselves more acceptable to others. They're told to be agreeable, to avoid conflict, and to suppress their instincts just to keep the peace. Society rewards those who follow the script, those who never question, never push back, and never demand more than what they're given. But you refuse to play that role. You exist on your own terms, and you don't apologize for it. So, gents, you don't shrink yourself to make others comfortable. You don't adjust your personality just to fit in. If something doesn't align with who you are, you reject it without a second thought. And that makes people uneasy. They're used to men who seek permission, who hesitate before speaking their minds, who compromise their own values just to be accepted. But you are a reminder that a man doesn't have to conform to be successful. He just has to be undeniable. This is why people misunderstand you. They mistake your independence for arrogance, your self-sufficiency for detachment, and your unwillingness to conform for rebellion. They try to make you feel like you're the problem, like you need to change, like you should be more like them. But the truth is they only say that because your existence exposes their weakness. They need validation to feel secure. You don't. They need approval to feel worthy. You never did. You're not difficult. You're just unwilling to betray yourself for the sake of acceptance. That's something most people will never understand because they've spent their whole lives trying to be what others want them to be, but not you. You don't fit into their mold, and you never will. And that's exactly why you stand out. Number 5, you don't fear being the villain in someone's story. Most people live in constant fear of being disliked. They tiptoe around the truth, water down their opinions, and silence themselves just to avoid offending anyone. They would rather be fake and accepted than real and misunderstood. But you don't have that weakness. You refuse to live on your knees just to make others comfortable. If being true to yourself makes you the villain in someone's story, so be it. You don't waste energy trying to control how others perceive you. Some people will misunderstand you no matter what you do. They will twist your words, project their insecurities onto you, and turn you into the bad guy, simply because you refuse to play by their rules. But that's not your concern. You're not here to be liked. You're here to be real. You don't live for approval, and you sure as hell don't live for permission. This is what separates you from the masses. While others obsess over their reputation, afraid of losing favor with people who don't even respect them, you stand firm in who you are. You say what needs to be said, make the moves that need to be made, and accept that not everyone will like you for it. That's the cost of being authentic, and it's a price you're willing to pay. The truth is, people will villainize you the moment you stop being easy to manipulate. The moment you start prioritizing yourself, setting boundaries, and refusing to tolerate nonsense, someone will label you as selfish, arrogant, or even ruthless. But that's just their way of trying to control you, and you don't fall for it. You would rather be feared for your honesty than loved for your compliance. You would rather walk alone in truth than be surrounded by people who only like the version of you that serves them. That's why you never beg to be understood. Those who get it, and those who don't, they were never meant to. Number 6, you redefine masculinity on your terms. Most people have a rigid idea of what masculinity should look like. Some believe it's about dominance, aggression, and never showing emotion. Others think it's about suppressing all natural instincts to be more agreeable and passive. But you don't follow anyone's definition. You don't fit into the outdated mold of the emotionless tough guy, nor do you buy into the idea that masculinity needs to be softened to be acceptable. You embody strength without insecurity, confidence without arrogance, and discipline without needing approval. You redefine masculinity on your own terms. You don't need to prove your strength by putting others down, nor do you see vulnerability as weakness. You operate with quiet confidence, unshaken by trends, opinions, or societal pressure. That kind of balance is rare, and that's why it confuses people. They expect men to fall into one extreme or the other, either overly aggressive or completely passive. But you show that real masculinity is about control, not chaos. Your presence alone is enough to challenge the status quo. You don't perform masculinity to gain respect, you simply live it. You're strong because you've built yourself to be. You're calm because you've mastered yourself. And you carry yourself with a level of assurance that doesn't require external validation. That's what makes you stand out. People may not understand your approach, and they may even try to label you as different, distant, or difficult, but that's because they've been conditioned to see masculinity through a narrow lens. You're proof that a man doesn't have to follow outdated rules to be powerful. He just has to own who he is. And that's exactly what you do. Number 7, you hold your own in any room. There's a difference between demanding attention and commanding it. Most people try too hard. They speak the loudest, take up unnecessary space, or overcompensate just to feel important. But you don't need to play those games. You walk into a room and people notice, not because you're trying to be seen, but because your presence speaks for itself. You don't force respect, you embody it. You never feel the need to prove yourself to anyone. Your confidence isn't loud, but it's undeniable. While others rely on status, validation, or empty talk to feel significant, you operate from a place of quiet strength. You know who you are, and that certainty radiates. It makes people pay attention even when you're not saying much. It makes them listen when you do. That's power most will never understand. You hold your own not because you crave dominance, but because you don't shrink for anyone. You don't change your energy to fit the room. You bring the room to your level. Whether you're surrounded by powerful figures, intellectuals, or people trying to undermine you, you remain unshaken. That rattles those who rely on social games and false confidence. They expect people to seek approval, to adjust themselves to be liked, but you never do. People respect you because they can feel that you're not seeking it. You don't need attention, yet you get it. You don't demand authority, yet it follows you. That's what makes you a force to be reckoned with. It's not about arrogance, it's about knowing exactly who you are and never needing anyone to confirm it. And in a world full of people trying too hard, that level of self-assurance is rare, unshakable, and impossible to ignore. Number 8, you refuse to be defined by trauma. Life has tested you in ways most people wouldn't understand. You've been hurt, betrayed, and knocked down, but you never let any of it break you. While others let their past define them, you use it to sharpen yourself. You don't walk around as a victim of your experiences, you carry them as proof of your strength. Your scars aren't a weakness, they're a testament to everything you've survived. Most people let trauma consume them. They hold on to their pain, allowing it to dictate their choices, their relationships, and their self-worth. They relive the past over and over, unable to move forward because they're still chained to what happened to them. But you refuse to be a prisoner to anything. No matter how much life has tested you, you never let it make you bitter, weak, or afraid. If anything, it made you more disciplined, more resilient, and more unshakable than ever. People may look at you and wonder how you remain so composed, how you don't crumble under the weight of everything you've been through. They expect you to be broken, resentful, or fragile. But instead, you move through life with a quiet strength that comes from knowing you've already survived worse. You don't complain, you don't seek pity, and you sure as hell don't let your past dictate your future. You've turned every hardship into a lesson, every setback into motivation. Where others see scars as reminders of pain, you see them as reminders of victories. You don't dwell on what could have been, and you don't waste time wishing things were different. You take what you've been given and make it work. That's what separates you from the rest. You refuse to let the past define you, and because of that, nothing, not pain, not betrayal, not failure, can ever truly defeat you. Number 9, you create trends, not follow them. Most people spend their lives chasing trends, desperate to fit in, afraid to stand alone. They wait for someone else to show them what's cool, what's acceptable, what's worth following. But you don't wait for permission to move. You don't ask what's trending. You set the trend. You operate in a way that others don't fully understand at first, but eventually they start copying. They mimic your style, your mindset, your way of moving, all while pretending they don't see you. That's how you know you're the blueprint. You never seek validation, yet people quietly take notes. You don't conform to what's popular, yet your influence spreads without effort. While others scramble to keep up with the next big thing, you stay ahead without even trying. That's because your moves are based on authenticity, not approval. You walk your own path, and people can't help but notice. Some will admire you, some will envy you, and some will resent you for not needing their acceptance. But they all watch. It's funny how the same people who act like you don't exist are the ones subconsciously imitating you. They steal your words, your mannerisms, your mindset, yet they'll never admit it. That's the reality of being the blueprint. People won't always give you credit, but they will follow your lead. And you don't even need their recognition because you never did it for them in the first place. You don't create trends for attention. You create them because you refuse to be anything other than yourself. That's what makes you stand out. You don't chase influence, it follows you. And while the rest of the world plays catch up, you keep evolving, always one step ahead. Number 10, you own your power without seeking permission. Most people wait. They wait for permission, for validation, for someone to tell them it's okay to be bold, to be great, to go after what they want. They hesitate, afraid of stepping outside the lines, afraid of being too much, too ambitious, too unapologetic. But you don't wait. You don't ask. You move. You take what's yours without hesitation because you understand something most people don't. Power isn't given, it's taken. You don't shrink yourself to make others comfortable. You don't second-guess your abilities or wait for the right moment. You create the moment. You walk into a room, and your presence alone shifts the energy. Not because you demand attention, but because you carry yourself like someone who knows his own worth. That kind of confidence is rare, and it unsettles those who rely on external validation to feel significant. The truth is, society conditions people to wait their turn, to seek approval before making a move. But you refuse to play that game. You don't need permission to exist at full capacity. You don't need someone else to say, now is the time. You decide the time. You take action, you make decisions, and you own the consequences, whether good or bad. That's what sets you apart. Some will call you reckless, arrogant, or even ruthless. But that's just the language of those who are too afraid to claim their own power. They don't understand what it means to operate without fear, to take charge without needing a green light from the world. You don't need validation, applause, or anyone's blessing. You take what's yours and you never apologize for it. That's real power, and once you have it, you never give it back. Number 11, you live with purpose, not for approval. Most people live their lives as if they're on a stage, constantly looking over their shoulders to see who's watching, who's approving, and who's clapping. They shape their decisions based on what will get them the most praise, the least criticism, and the highest level of acceptance. But you don't have time for that. Your energy isn't wasted on chasing approval because you're too busy chasing purpose. You don't move through life asking for permission. You don't hesitate before making a decision, wondering if it will be popular. You don't water yourself down to fit into someone else's expectations. You know exactly where you're going, and you don't need applause to keep moving forward. That kind of self-assurance makes people uncomfortable because it reminds them of how directionless they are. Most people rely on external validation to feel important, but you don't play that game. And because of that, you're free in a way they will never be. People will try to pull you back into their world of distractions, trends, and empty pursuits. They'll say you're too focused, too distant, too hard to relate to. What they really mean is that they can't control you. They don't understand how you can operate without the need for recognition. They don't get how you can be so committed to something without constantly looking for reassurance. But that's the difference between a man who leads and a man who follows. A life built on purpose is unshakable. It doesn't crumble under pressure, and it doesn't slow down for approval. You move because your vision demands it, not because someone else approves of it. That's why you stand out. That's why you win. While the rest of the world wastes time proving themselves, you're out there building something real, and that's why you don't need their validation. You already have something far greater. Remember this, gents. The world will always try to make you feel like you're the problem. It will tell you that you should soften your edges, lower your standards, and fit into a mold that was never made for you. But deep down, you already know the truth. You're not the problem, you're the example. You are what happens when a man refuses to be controlled, refuses to beg for approval, and refuses to live on his knees just to make others comfortable. You don't follow trends, you create them. You don't seek validation, you move with certainty. You don't apologize for your strength, your independence, or your unwillingness to conform. And because of that, people will misunderstand you. They will resent you for what they can't be. They will call you difficult, distant, or cold, not realizing that what they truly fear is your freedom. The kind of freedom that comes from knowing exactly who you are and never compromising on it. But that's the price of standing out. The world has always feared men who can't be controlled. And yet, history is shaped by those who refuse to follow the script. So let them misunderstand you. Let them talk. Let them question why you don't move like the rest. At the end of the day, you're not here to be liked. You're here to lead. And whether they admit it or not, they're all watching you to see what happens next. Keep moving forward. Keep building. Keep proving that a man's value doesn't come from the world's approval, but from his own unshakable sense of self. Because you were never meant to fit in. You were meant to set the standard,